Hey guys, we are live for another Friday Q&A. Today's topic is going to be the dangers of period tracking apps. I know, kind of a provocative title, but you'll understand what I mean when we get to the end of the Q&A. Now, before I start the actual Q&A portion, I just want to tell you something that I did today. Something that I did this week, which was pretty exciting, and I'm going to invite you to do something like this as well. I actually bought a whole new set of organic, hypoallergenic bamboo underwear, and I threw out everything that I had. And the reason why I did this is because I had been reading a lot about underwear that we buy just at normal shops, you know, like Target, Marks and Spencer, just your kind of bulk standard underwear, and how a lot of these pairs of underwear are made in like bad conditions where they may have like formaldehyde, and like the dyes are not high quality, the cotton fabrics or blends, you know, of cotton and other kind of nasty things for your vulva, for your vagina, for the whole down there area. So I thought, you know what, here's one thing that I'm gonna do for my lady parts, for my health. I threw out all my underwear and brought all brand new. Now, I am a little bit of like, I guess a guy in a kind of like a guy in a way, that with underwear, I can definitely have like a uniform where I just have black, pretty much all the same pair, so I don't have to think about it. And also because I think partially I spent a lot of my adult life with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, having really irregular periods and never knowing when it's gonna come, how long it's gonna last for. And when you're like young and you're living in apartments where you have like, you know, you don't have a washer or dryer and you're taking things out, or you're traveling, you know that it's easy to run out of underwear. And so I got into the habit of just buying all black because I didn't stain them, I didn't mess them up, I didn't have to think about it. Plus black is also kind of sexy. So the ones that I bought, they're from a shop called, I think it's called Sock Shop in the UK. I got those because they would ship here to Malta pretty cheaply, and I got 9 pairs of their plain hypoallergenic bamboo underwear with like a lace trim at the top. So they're cute. So I'm going to invite you, you know, to think about that. Think about your underwear drawer. I also read a study within the last few months that said that we should actually be throwing out our underwear every 6 months. I definitely am not doing that, not on that schedule at all. So reading that just gave me, you know, the impetus to kind of throw them out and start afresh again. So I'd be curious if any of you guys like use hypoallergenic underwear, if you've ever thought of it, if you've ever tried bamboo. Apparently the bamboo is really a nice one because it's antibacterial. 2, because the bamboo fibers are rounded at the edge, which means that they don't irritate your lady parts down there. So it's supposed to be a softer fabric as well. I'm going to give them a wash first before I wear them, but I'll let you know how it goes. Wanted to say hi guys, because I see some people are watching. And if anybody's new, I'm Nicole Harlow, and this is Girl Meets Body, so it's really nice to have you here. So I was just talking about buying new underwear, just kind of a segue for today's topic, but since we have some people watching now, I'm gonna dive into the topic of the day, which is the danger of period tracking apps. Now, I read a study just recently. The article was actually in Time magazine. That's kind of where I first clocked onto it. It was a study from the University of Washington in the US, and what they were saying is out of 53 different period tracking apps that they had tested, so they tested the accuracy, they tested the algorithms, and then they had interviews with women who use these apps themselves. And what they found is out of 53, only 4 of them were accurate. And even out of those 4, they weren't accurate all the time. So that got me thinking a lot about period tracking apps. And I had read some more after that, like about, you know, the dangers of using period tracking apps. But I want to kind of start off and the positive and say that, and talk a little bit about the benefits of period tracking apps, because I use them myself. I advise clients to use them. I have a lot of clients that come in the clinic that have used different period tracking apps, and it's great because I know from being a clinician that I can just, I feel like for me, the number one benefit is they can hand me their phone. I can look at it, I can scroll through, and I can see, okay, this is the data, and then I can use that as an opportunity to talk to them about, okay, this part here, did you put that information in, or is that the app? So I'm not familiar with every single app, so sometimes someone comes in with an app that I've never seen before, and I have to kind of ask them some questions about which part they participated in and which part was just automatically populated from the app. So I think the number one benefit that I'd say that comes from using period tracking apps, and when I say period tracking apps, I mean things like Clue, Glow, Eve, Fertility Friend, My Days, and things like that. So you probably use one. If you do use one, let me know in the comments which one that you use so I can see like which one you guys are using. So for me, the number one benefit is the convenience. It's something that we all have our phones with us pretty much like all the time. It's something that's probably by your bed when you wake up, you have it throughout the day. So if you do start your period or you have symptoms, rather than having to wait until you get home and get your piece of paper and writing it down, you have it on the app. So I find that when I use the app, I'm so much more likely to actually track my symptoms and put down, my period information versus when I've tried to do it in a notebook. So I think convenience is number one benefit. Number two is I think that using an app, especially for a lot of women who are just new to like fertility tracking, new to cycle tracking, it can be a really non-threatening way to like ease into the process of tracking your symptoms every day. So, Flow Healthy, cool, thanks. Yeah, I like that one. I think that's the one that has, it like talks you through like the weeks too, and lets you know like what cycle strengths you have throughout the month. I think that's really cool. Yeah, so I think that it can be a really non-threatening way for women to start learning how to track the symptoms, track their cycle. And for that, I'm going to give it, a benefit number two. Benefit number three, I think, like I said when we first started out, is that you always have your information with you. And whether you're going to a doctor, a fertility specialist, even if you're going to, say, a nutritionist or any practical practitioner or clinician, acupuncturist, it's always great to have your information right there. And I'm sure that plenty of times you've been to the gynecologist or the doctor and maybe they ask you, when was your last period? And you're like, I don't know. I had it within the last month, but I have no idea what the date is. So I think it's really helpful when you can just whip out the phone and say, okay, here you go. Here's the last, check out my last 5 or 6 periods. So, I think that's, for me, number 3 benefit. And number 4 benefit is if you do, this is the important thing, is if you do have a regular cycle, and that's doesn't matter if it's 28 days, it could be 29, it could be 30, but if you have that cycle where you're always ovulating on day 14 and you're always bleeding on day 28, then using a period app can be a really good predictor of when you're fertile or when you're not fertile. So those fertile windows and then the safe windows outside of the fertility window and ovulation window. But that kind of segues me into the dangers. So those are my benefits, and I want to, like I said, I like period apps, I do use them. But I think that one of the issues, and this is what they said in the study, is that there are a lot of women who are using the period apps without really tracking any of their own symptoms themselves, and using this app like it's the truth. And like I said in the beginning of this Q&A, they found that only 4 out of 53 were accurate, and of those 4, they weren't even accurate all the time. So I think what we need to do with period apps is we need to take them with a grain of salt. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the way that they work and why they're not great all the time at predicting. So a lot of the period tracker apps, they're using an algorithm that's based on the start date of your period and the end date of your period. They're going off the assumption that most women have a 28-day cycle and that most women ovulate at day 14. And what we know from research and actually just talking to women and seeing what women's cycles are like is that's not indicative of the average woman. That is if you have a quote unquote perfect cycle. And even women with the perfect cycle are not going to have that every single month. So, you know, in your body, you know, you may have a 28-day cycle, it may be pretty regular, but you do have those months where it just isn't really right, you know, for whatever reason. Maybe you're traveling, maybe you've had a really stressful time at work. Maybe the month before was like the winter, like Christmas, Hanukkah, holidays, and you had a little bit too much eggnog and ate too many cookies, and that really messed up your blood sugar. And then the next month when you went to prepare for your period, it was a few days late, for example. So the algorithm is, yeah, like I said, it's based on the information that you put in, which is the start date and the end date of your period. Now, a lot of women are also tracking their fertility signals with something like Thermo symptom method or fertility awareness method, in which case you may be taking your temperature in the morning and putting your basal body temperature in there. You may be checking your cervical fluid daily and putting that information in there. And that's great because you have that to look back on and you can kind of look through the data. But the thing is, the algorithm for the app is not taking that into account. So I see every month when I look at my app that I'm tracking my symptoms myself, I'm taking my temperature, I'm checking daily to see my cervical fluid. When I see that it's that fertile fluid, which is when it's transparent, it's kind of, you know, you either have it on your finger, you can see it when you wipe yourself, that you have a lot more cervical fluid, it's clear, it's stretchy, it's slippery. I'm looking for that to see whether I'm ovulating. I'm taking my temperature in the morning. I'll input the information in my app and I'll see that the app is wrong. The app is telling me that I ovulated a few days ago, or I'm about to ovulate in a few days, when I know that it's happening right now. So I even see it within my own app that it's not good at predicting my fertility window. And I'd say that it's wrong pretty much every single month. Maybe it's right like 1 month in 12. And I use Clue, which is one of the biggest ones. So it's not like I'm using some like janky app that has like a crappy algorithm. So I hope that explains a little bit about like the science and the mathematics in a way of how the prediction works. So essentially the apps aren't very good at predicting. They're good at predicting if you have a completely normal cycle, but even then, that's not always the case. So I'm going to talk you through a scenario so you maybe understand this a little better about how you could have a perfect 28-day cycle and the app can still get it wrong. So if you have something called a short luteal phase, which means that you're low in progesterone, you may notice if you have low progesterone, if you get a little bit of brown spotting before your period starts, or your period starts like kind of like a slow trickle, like rather than turning the faucet on and the water starts to come down, it's like a leaky faucet. It's coming out just a little bit of spotting. Maybe that's over like a few days and then you start to bleed like in earnest. If you see that, that's usually an indication that your progesterone might be low. And low progesterone is usually comes, you know, part and parcel with having a short luteal phase. Now, that's not good if you're trying to get pregnant because you need to have a long luteal phase in order to protect the implantation, right? So a lot of early term miscarriages come from having a short luteal phase, having low progesterone. So normally the luteal phase should be 14 days. That means from the time you ovulate to the time you bleed should be 14 days. Now, as a clinician, we're looking for at least 12 days. So I'd like to see it like be between 12 and 14. Anything earlier than that, so if you know that you've ovulated and you're starting to bleed on day 10, day 11, especially if you're seeing some brown spotting, that's a cause for concern and you want to either talk to your doctor about having your hormones tested or work with like a natural practitioner to bump up your progesterone levels. But how this corresponds to having the period tracking app is because the period tracking app is going to tell you, right, so you start bleeding on day 1, and then we go all the way down to day 28. Your period tracking app is going to tell you at day 14 you ovulated, because it's going to assume that your luteal phase is 14 days. That's going to take you up to day 28. You like this board that I have over here? Imaginary board. So if you have a short luteal phase, right, of 10 days, that means that you probably ovulated around day 18, not day 14. So the app's going to see that you had a 28-day cycle and say, hey, she usually has 28 days. Women ovulate on day 14, so we're going to tell her that she's fertile on day 14, when actually you're not fertile until day 18 or a day before. So, you know, I know it's a lot of kind of like math and maybe it's a little bit complicated, but this can catch a lot of women out, and especially women, well, two populations of women. One are the women trying to get pregnant, who keep trying to have sex during their fertile window of day 12, day 13, day 14, not realizing that they're not ovulating until 16, 17, 18, so they're not even having sex, or they're not even thinking of themselves as fertile during that time. So they're completely missing their window every single month, trying to get pregnant for 6, 8, 12 months and saying, this isn't working. I have a perfect 28-day cycle. What's going on? Not realizing that perhaps they have a short luteal phase and they're actually ovulating late. Some women ovulate earlier than day 14. Some women even ovulate when they're still bleeding from the period before. So they may see blood and say, right, not fertile, because they're not checking any of the other fertility signs like temperature or cervical fluid. The other population is women who are using these apps to not get pregnant. Perhaps they have a monogamous partner, they've had their STIs tested, and they're like, you know, we're not going to use condoms, we're not going to use any, we're going to do this naturally, and we're going to use the app to help us. Now they see their fertility window, say we'll take the same woman for example, the app's telling her day 14, she's ovulating, this is not your safe window. If you don't want to get pregnant, don't have sex during these 5 days around here. Not realizing she's not ovulating until day 18. She thinks she's in her safe window. When she gets to day 18, bam, she gets pregnant. So I've seen a lot of press and publicity going around, like with the newspapers and the online blogs and stuff, about women getting pregnant using these apps. And that's one of the biggest reasons, is they're either ovulating early, they think that they're still at the tail end of their period. Say perhaps you have like a 7-day cycle, which is around what I have. I bleed for like the full 7 days, not super heavy all days, but I do have blood or spotting all the way through the 7 days. Some women have 3 or 5, you know, or 6, but I go all 7. But if I was to start ovulating early, and sperm can live within the vaginal canal and the uterus and the fallopian tubes for up to 6 days. So if I saw blood and I just assumed, and my app is telling me that I'm not in the fertile window, then I could have unprotected sex and very easily get pregnant during that time. And I think that's what happens for a lot of women. And so what's happening is you're just using this app as a predictor to either get pregnant or not get pregnant. What you're doing is you're really just using a digitized version of the old school rhythm method, which we know is not, doesn't have any kind of good statistics behind it in terms of being, in terms of its efficacy. So what can we do instead? You know, and I guess the other thing that I want to say about the dangers, not that this is a danger so much, I think the danger is really getting pregnant, accidentally getting pregnant when you're using this app, especially for young women who just think, you know, are like technological iPhone natives who like do everything via like the phone and instill so much trust in the phone. I think that there can be this false sense of security when the app is telling you you're like in a safe zone or you're in a fertile window. So I think that for me, that's probably the biggest danger. But I think that there can be an emotional danger as well for women who are trying to get pregnant and using an app as their sole indicator, because I understand, you know, for the women that I know and that I work with at the clinic, that there's an emotional toll that it takes when you're trying to get pregnant and it's not working. And so I think the danger for that can be the mental health, the feeling of well-being for women who are trying to get pregnant using an app solely and it's not happening. So I think, you know, I think what we can do is, or a really intelligent way to handle this issue is to use the app for what it is, which is a tool. It's a tool for storing information. It's a tool for using to share with your doctor, another practitioner, or a partner. It's a tool to kind of help remind you every day to take that information. But I think that we definitely need to take this information with a little bit of salt, and not think that it's fact, you know, that to realize that these apps do have a problem with predicting, even if it gets it right. Part of the time, it's probably getting it wrong part of the time as well. And then it's no different than gambling, you know, you're just gambling on a kind of uncertain bet, you know. But what we can do is use the apps in combination with the principles of fertility awareness method, which is checking your cervical fluid every day. But, you know, if you have a pretty regular cycle, you can actually get away with just checking your cervical fluid from the last few days of your menstrual cycle. So let's say like days like 3, 4, 5, all the way up until you've confirmed that you've ovulated. By doing that, in case you're curious about fertility awareness method, about how you do this, when you go to the bathroom, you can either check to see what's on the toilet paper in addition to, because you know some fluid will come out on the tissue as well as like some urine. So just having a look at it, seeing the color. But what I like to do even better is to just take one finger, clean, wash your hands first, take one finger, put it inside of the vagina, kind of swirl it around a little bit, see what comes off, and you know, look at the finger, and what you're looking for is color, texture, and just quantity. So when you'll know that you're getting towards your fertile window when you start to have more. So the mucus usually goes from period blood, then it goes quite dry right after that for a few days. So you should feel, you know, not very lubricated at all. Then it goes creamy or lotion-like, so it should feel kind of like lotion that you would put on your skin. Usually around that time it has like a yellowish or a whitish look to it. Then when you get to the fertile window, you will see fluid that's kind of slippery, that's greater in quantity, and when you have it on your finger, it will start to stretch a little bit. If you're grossed out by this, I'm sorry, but you know, this is part of understanding our bodies. As women, we should be comfortable to touch ourselves, to see what's going on, because our body is giving us this information all the time. We're just not really looking or knowing the right signs, you know? So if you see the fluid and then you're looking at your app and the app's telling you, okay, you're headed into your fertile window, then I would feel pretty confident to trust that. But if the app is saying you're heading into your fertile window and you're checking your fluid in the morning or anytime during the day and you're like, well, I see creamy, lotiony, kind of, you know, I'm seeing that kind of like creamy, white or yellow in color, but my app is telling me that I'm fertile, I'm going to trust my body over the app because I know I'm studying the principles. I know that that's not fertile cervical fluid. So I know that my body hasn't ovulated yet, or maybe it already has, because just as it goes period, dry, creamy, slippery, it goes back down again, creamy, dry, period again. So you can just think about it like a parabola or a curve throughout the month. So that's something, you know, I think that's my biggest recommendation and my biggest takeaway is, one, use your app, but don't trust it as fact. Make sure that you're always looking to your body to find out what's actually going on in your body. Do you have the other Thermo symptoms of ovulation? And you know, there's some, besides just having the cervical fluid, there's other symptoms, like if you take your temperature every morning, you should see a spike post-ovulation, and that way you can confirm that ovulation did indeed happen. You also could feel, you know, just things in your body, like your breasts might feel bigger. Usually during ovulation, women tend to have a higher sex drive. So are you having kind of sexy dreams or fantasies, or you having desires to have more sex with a partner? Those are all kind of like good clues that you're around the ovulatory phase of your cycle. And the other thing is that when women are ovulating, they tend to feel really good, you know? So if you have those days where you feel like you're having a good hair day, your confidence is pretty high, you're not feeling a lot of anxiety, and then you look at the app and the app says, yeah, you're probably this is probably your ovulation phase, then I would feel pretty confident to trust that as well. So anyway, this has been really dense topic. Thank you so much for staying with me and watching to the end. I love these Fridays Q&As, and yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and just type it out in the comment box and we'll see. I'm gonna make myself a smoothie after this, hemp protein, which I'm really liking right now. All right, guys, so I will see you next week. And for anybody who is watching in Malta, I am actually doing a workshop tomorrow at Pure Living. It starts at 2 o'clock. So that's Saturday the 24th at 2 o'clock. And the topic is going to be healing your hormones naturally. So hope to see you guys there. And if not, I'll see you next week. Bye.